let's get this series on RuneQuest underway, shall we? Now, for this first installment, I thought we would just take a look at why RuneQuest. The plan has been to build a fantasy world from the ground up. The cosmology, the societies, the terrain, you name it. To build that from scratch and select from an appropriate game system the supporting structures or mechanics to make all of this flow naturally. So pretty much from the beginning, I felt I was looking for a system that was closer to a toolbox than something that was written for an express purpose. So I was looking for a system that didn't carry too many preconceptions along with it. Now, one of the first things to occur to me was BRP, basic role-playing. But at the same time, I'm aware that that set of rules is written so openly that it can be used in any time period, and you'll be picking through different aspects that aren't really written for fantasy, which may not actually be a problem. But then you have RuneQuest, which clearly is designed for fantasy and is designed to give you the tools that you need to build a fantasy world, excluding or including things rather than tailoring or redesigning or mixing and matching, that kind of thing. So it sounds simpler than the actual process was. I looked at a lot of games, and I looked at simply excluding their settings. I looked at unusual mechanics, like, for example, Dungeon Crawl Classics. I looked at it for a long time, wondering if I really wanted to get into that kind of dice style. I, of course, considered Ubiquity because it would be easy to continue on using the same system I have been using, just wrapping a new setting around it. And I knew from experience playing Desolation that Ubiquity does just fine. In fact, it does excellently with fantasy. So again, why change? I wanted to do something different, so that meant not using Ubiquity. I wanted to explore the past fantasy for me, so why not include a game system that I never really played? I just played most of. So there you have it. Now this new version of RuneQuest, there are many editions and versions of RuneQuest. Why the 6th edition? Easy reason. It has been separated from its traditional setting of Glorantha. I have no interest in using Glorantha because I want to build my own. And this edition was wonderfully put together. Not only does it lay out its concepts in a very clear and precise way of writing, but the designers also included their rationale for why these decisions or why these design approaches were taken. And I appreciate that effort, and it makes it much easier for me to get back to speed with this system and incorporate the parts of it that I've never seen before, incorporate the new variations that have just been prepared for RuneQuest 6, and that sort of thing. It's very easy to get into. Now, the layout of the book threw me off at first because each section of the book is actually laid out in alphabetical order. This is going to make things incredibly easy to find in the future, but reading it through from cover to cover, it's a little weird having these concepts come at you separately. Alright. That's part of the reason why RuneQuest. The next reason was I was looking for fearsome combat. I don't ever want the players to reach a plateau or a level where they are not afraid of combat. I've always found in in games like this, in fantasy games where there is a lot of violence and there's not a lot of societal consequence to that violence. You know, if you're trucking across the wastelands and are attacked by, you know, evil beings, there's it's a very rare fantasy setting where a sheriff tracks you down for these murders. So I wanted violence to be scary in its own right, not needing the sort of societal controls that limit violence, for a couple of reasons. One, it's interesting. Two, it provides a challenge both in and of itself, can we win, but also in terms of creativity in getting around it, getting out of it, dealing with it after the fact, and a system like RuneQuest allows that to happen simply. So, also, it's designed by people who enjoy sparring. So the game has been written to reproduce some of the realities that come about when you're actually fighting another person with different weapons. And I like that just fine. So I'm looking forward to experimenting with the combat. I'm looking forward to selecting the types of magic, and I'm looking forward to laying the groundwork of a civilization using RuneQuest's well-developed cult rules and levels of civilization. So there's the rationale behind all of this. Now, normally, my style of play is to engage the play group before I start building anything, so that I build exactly what they want. But this time, I'm building for me, and I plan to recruit players who are interested in the situation or the setting that I've created. So this will be a little unusual for me, and perhaps more toward the narrative side of the hobby, which I don't direct my attention to as often. So in some cases, as we go through this series, we will be flipping back and forth between how it would be handled if players were involved and how it would be handled if the Game Master were just making decisions prior to play. So, in a 7-minute or an 8-minute nutshell, that's what we're doing with the series. So, is there any content in this clip? Of course there is. Don't be silly. Now, approaching this without a player group to harvest ideas and opinions and reactions from, I'll be left in kind of a creative vacuum. So, to make it easy for myself, and also to make it easy for players to decide whether or not they want to play in such a setting, what I need to do is make it as easy as possible, which means I will be focusing on a specific area and one or possibly two cultures that intermingle to provide some play options. Now, these cultures will need to showcase a lot of the ideas that I would like to get across about what makes this fantasy world worth playing in. Religion, politics, environment, history, that sort of thing, without turning it into a massive info dump that really no one would ever want to listen to. The kind of environment where players might choose to focus on an urban campaign or head off into the wilderness to do your typical adventuring lifestyle. I still want to leave it as open as possible for my potential players, while allowing myself the enjoyment of designing the game world without interference. So the process that I'm following is identifying what my design goals are, what my ultimate goal for interacting with the playgroup is, and then building from there. So the selection of the system, the selection of the type of fantasy world, these things will reside with me. When I find players that are interested in this setting and this system, we'll go forward from there to design what the campaign actually is. Make sense? Stay tuned for the next part. We'll get into more nitty-gritty